Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 10 of season 3 of Babylon 5, Severed Dreams. Let's do this. Londo is complaining to his fellow passengers about how inefficient the Narn are as the new security force on the station, causing delays to departures. Then he turns to hand his identity card to a Narn. For some strange reason, his identity card won't read. The Narn observes he may have entered the data incorrectly, as he is, of course, terribly inefficient. Of course, he knows who Londo is, but verification is required. Should only take a few hours. As Londo notes, this wouldn't have happened if the humans hadn't started fighting amongst themselves. And so our scene switches to the Alexander, a rebel Omega-class cruiser being chased down by a Hyperion-class cruiser, the Clarkstown. The Alexander's fighters are taking some of the damage meant for the Alexander, but another hit will cause them to lose gravity. The Major's second on the Alexander wants them to jump out, but he protests as it would mean losing fighters because they can't afford to bring them in prior to jumping out. So his second presents their only other option, opening fire with their aft batteries because the Clarkstown's forward interceptors are down and they can punch through its hull. The Major has to give the order, and the Alexander's Furies and Thunderbolts, a newer class of fighter, climb hard to get out of the line of fire. The Clarkstown goes down, and the fighters start getting pulled back in. The Major notes that he knew the captain of the Clarkstown, and his family, including their cat. This is what makes this war different to any they fought before. They know who they're killing. He orders the jump to hyperspace as soon as the fighters are back on board, with only one place for them to go to recover: Babylon 5. Sheridan has received a tight beam transmission from the Alexander. They're 5 hours out, and hell will be following close behind them, given that there's the galactic equivalent of a 0 points bulletin on them. As soon as they're in local space, someone will tip Earth off, so Sheridan asks Garibaldi to put a kill switch on all comms, just leaving the ISN feed active and one channel back to Earth for them. Then they'll just have to see how things play out. Meanwhile, Franklin meets Delenn and Lanier in the arrivals area as an injured Minbari needs his attention, a ranger who's been gathering intelligence in the League worlds for the past 6 months. He needs medbay, but the Narn are on security and Delenn doesn't know who to trust. Jakar emerges from the shadows, saying he does, and picks the wounded Minbari up by himself, telling Delenn he can carry him as far as she needs him to. ISN continues to report on the events on Earth. Mars has refused to enact the martial law declaration, and Earth Dome's considering its options. Ivanova tells Sheridan the cut-off is in place as Corwin reports the jump gate activating, bringing the Alexander in. Sheridan tells Garibaldi to kill comms and addresses the command staff, telling them he and Ivanova take personal responsibility for rendering aid to the Alexander, and gives them the opportunity to leave the command deck if they are uncomfortable. No one does. So far, so good. Sheridan notes that as much as humanity's got them into this, humanity will get them out. In Medbay, the Ranger brings grim news. The Shadows have made promises of protection to many non-aligned worlds who have agreed out of fear of falling to the Centauri, but the resulting confidence has caused them to go to war with their neighbours, thinking the Shadows will not allow them to be defeated. The Grey Council has said that the affairs of others are not their concern. Delenn is clearly taken aback by this. Major Ryan comes on board the station from the Alexander and is also a bearer of bad news. General Haig is dead. He'd come back from attending a meeting in the Orion system when the Clarkstown hit the Alexander as he was on his way to the command deck, killing him. Major Ryan has done his best since then, but the crew is in strung-out shape. Earth seems peaceful, but it's the peace of the gun. ISN isn't reporting everything because it knows it can't. Ryan is hopeful that if Mars can hold out, other colonies will follow, giving them a support base. Just then, his ship calls in to notify them that Earth Force has begun bombing Mars. 2 Thunderbolts with faceless pilots unleash air-to-ground missiles onto a civilian Martian dome. Delenn is heading out to try and talk sense into the Grey Council, leaving Lanier in her place on the station. Jakar joins them with Ivanova, who tells them that they have priority clearance as everyone is trying to get out. Delenn thanks Jakar for his help, noting that he is not quite the same person she first met 4 years ago, acknowledging his growth. As she jumps out through the gate, another jump point forms above it, bringing another Earth destroyer, the Churchill, into local space, captained by Hiroshi. She is expected, but will not communicate on an open channel. ISN was reporting the attacks on Mars when a male newsreader sits next to the female newsreader to announce Orion 7 and Proxima 3 have broken away from the Earth Alliance in protest at the attacks on Mars and are declaring independence until Clark is impeached. The female newsreader is clearly nervous as all hell, and the male newsreader explains that Clark doesn't want this news known, but they have to get it out now before they get shut down. And they are getting shut down. Armed troops are attacking their station in Geneva, and as debris starts falling from the ceiling, the broadcast is replaced by static. Hiroshi reports that she's come from Orion 7, and Clark is sending his elite troops to secure the breakaway colonies. They also intercepted orders to the Agrippa and the Roanoke. They're to ensure Babylon 5 doesn't break away, and we're already en route, so Major Ryan's plan to bug out just won't cut it. With 6 hours to prepare, Sheridan asks Ryan to stay put. He returns to his ship, as does Hiroshi, leaving Sheridan, Ivanova, Garibaldi and Franklin to make a binary choice: surrender or fight the oncoming train. Sheridan notes that it isn't just them, it's 250,000 lives on the station at risk. They all decide to fight. We see a brief glimpse of 2 Omegas and 2 Hyperion-class ships with fighters in hyperspace. Company's coming. Sheridan anticipates breaching actions and wants the Narn fully armed alongside non-Night Watch forces, given Jakar's guaranteed their loyalty. 2 squadrons of Furies are to be in space, anything that can fly ready to go immediately after. Non-critical cases are to be moved out of medbay. He also asks Ivanova to access Draal's holographic system on Epsilon 3 for an announcement. Delenn has boarded the Grey Council cruiser and confronts an acolyte trying to bar her way, who says they will not let her speak, but she says they will just have to listen. She notes that she served the council for 16 cycles and was Ducat's chosen to replace him. She held him as he died. His blood is on her hands, his spirit in her eyes, his word on her lips. She orders him to move aside, or in Valen's name she will tear the ship apart with her bare hands until she finds them. He moves. She addresses the council. She tells them that pride and presumption was theirs and not hers as things fall apart. She accuses them, the warrior caste in particular, of having abandoned the belief that the council was created to uphold. So she takes the trilunary staff and breaks it, and in so doing the council, as was prophesied, taking with her the worker and religious castes who between them control 2/3 of their fleet in order to uphold their covenant with Valen and stand against the shadows. Sheridan has phoned home in part to warn his dad about what's coming, in part to say goodbye. His father reminds him of his first lesson: never start a fight, but always finish one. He says he and his mum will be okay, their neighbours like them, and encourages him to do what he believes to be right before letting him go. Sheridan arrives on the command deck as Ivanova finishes the hookup with Draal's system. Sheridan then appears in holographic form across the entire station to ensure he has everyone's attention. He notes that warships are coming to take the station by force, but as commander of Babylon 5 he cannot allow that to happen. He notes that President Clark has broken the Constitution by dissolving the Senate and declaring martial law, and is directly responsible for the bombing of civilian targets. So Babylon 5 now joins the colonies in succeeding from the Earth Alliance, and will remain an independent state until Clark is removed from office. Furies launch en masse and security forces arm up as he speaks. He encourages civilians to stay in their quarters. As he finishes it up, he notes they're in it now. Ivanova queries using Draal to help with the defence, but Sheridan says he's their ace in the hole and it's not his fight. Sheridan tells anyone not comfortable now to leave the command deck. One officer leaves. Ivanova asks Corwin if he's okay. He's surprised, but he's okay. She then makes a request that surprises Sheridan, to join a Starfury squadron because they're being asked to fire on their own comrades. He knows she's right, and they exchange looks before she leaves. Corwin calls out the jump gate activation. Dexter Smith on the Agrippa orders Babylon 5 and the renegade ships to stand down. Major Ryan gives him the metaphorical finger by launching fighters. Sheridan speaks to the opposing force, noting they've declared independence and their belief that the order to attack Babylon 5 is illegal under the Earth Alliance Constitution. Both forces close on one another, but Sheridan orders the rebel contingent to hold fire until fired upon. They won't start the fight, but by God they'll finish it. And start it does. Boom today, folks. Ivanova orders Delta Wing to punch a hole through the enemy so Alpha can get in close to their capital ships. The Churchill and Alexander use their pulse weapons to disrupt incoming beam fire from the Agrippa and the Roanoke as Furies close. Thunderbolts are also in the mix, as the defence grid is used to target the smaller ships. Ryan orders the Alexander to close on the enemy, right down their throats. Corwin reports a breaching pod coming in, aiming at Brown 95. It's a conical-shaped ship with Star Fury thrusters designed to latch onto a hole and burn through. Garibaldi is on it, although his Narn troops aren't quite up on the chain of command. They are cut down by the boarding troops, reminiscent of Drakar's expression that some must be sacrificed to save others, but they buy time to get the defence in place and try and hold the line. In space, enemy Furies target the command deck, but the point defences just about manage to hold them, although a panel blows up near Sheridan, knocking him off his feet and wounding his head. He orders defensive fire redirected at the Roanoke, as one of his wingmen calls out a warning about the Churchill. It's extensively damaged with multiple hull breaches and fires visible. Major Ryan orders Hiroshi to evacuate, but she has other ideas. She ploughs the Churchill into the side of the Roanoke, effectively decapitating the enemy ship at the cost of her own. Ivanova is distracted and collides with an enemy Fury. Sheridan orders her to eject despite her protestations that she can handle it, but she can't, and ejects just before her Fury impacts on the hull of the Agrippa. The Alexander has completed its closing manoeuvre and opens up on the side of the Agrippa with its front beam weapon, causing significant hull damage. It seems Sheridan redirects the station's fire from the Roanoke to the Agrippa as the defence grid pummels it from the other side. However, he then calls the Roanoke. Clearly, effects got switched at some point, as presumably it was the Agrippa that should have been rammed, as the script has the Roanoke as their last ship standing. Nitpicky of me, I know. Also completely irrelevant, because the Agrippa goes up from the damage it sustained anyway, despite Sheridan not offering to let them surrender. We don't see what happens to the Hyperion-class ships, but I would assume that the Furies deal with them off-screen as the fight seems over once the Agrippa goes up. As Corwin reports significant structural damage and continued fighting in Brown sector, his console starts bleeping and he just says, "Oh no," as another Earth fleet jumps in through the gate again, ordering their surrender. Shortly after, Corwin pipes up again about jump points forming right on top of them. Sheridan shuts his eyes and asks how many. 4. And now one of the best bits of the series. It's not Earth Force, it's the Minbari Cavalry. 3 war cruisers and Elen on board the White Star. She has a little word with the new opposing force, led by Captain Drake. This is Ambassador Delenn of the Minbari. Babylon 5 is under our protection. Withdraw or be destroyed. Negative. We have authority here. Do not force us to engage your ship. Why not? Only one human captain has ever survived battle with the Minbari fleet. He is behind me. You are in front of me. If you value your lives, be somewhere else. Such an epic exchange. Boom! They bug out through jump points at impressive speed for Earth capital ships. Well played, Len. Well played. She's definitely got us to tie on in that moment. Sheridan orders all ships to return to base, and if you think Jerry Doyle looks like he's going to throw up, not far off the truth, his arm was actually broken for real by that point. Ugh. The Minbari cruisers and White Star patrol local space as the Star Fury takes debris back to the station. Sheridan and Ryan discuss the station's losses. 30% of its Furies disabled or destroyed. Ryan notes that his own launch bays are damaged, so he can't take all of the Churchill's fighters, and suggests that they remain with the station. Sheridan agrees, noting that he didn't know Hiroshi that well, but would be honoured to look after her crew. Sheridan is told Delenn has arrived and gets up to leave, with Ryan planning to jump out and find other rebel ships, noting that Sheridan has left his uniform jacket on a chair. But Sheridan says he hasn't forgotten it, he just can't put it on again until this is over. Garibaldi meets him on the way to meet Delenn, his leg seemingly the problem, noting that they've started shipping people out, but of course they can only get rid of the night watches they know about, meaning sabotage is likely to be an issue from this point. Sheridan meets Delenn and tries to thank her for what she did, she in turn saying she could not abandon her partner, shaking hands with Sheridan then kissing hers. As Ivanova arrives with Franklin, noting her cracked ribs and bumps, before she ushers the captain to the Zocalo, where a crowd breaks into applause for the assembled crew as the camera pans onto a torn Nightwatch poster saying "Traitors can't hide." Oh, such a big episode. Hell, such a boom episode. Lots of boom today. And very nearly halfway through the show as a whole, we have this. Yes, I bloody love the space battles, of course I did. I'll come to that. The key thing about this episode that you have to remember is that this is where everything changes. No more secrets about Earth, it's all out there now, and everyone has made their choice, together. And Delenn has broken the ruling body of the Minbari to create an alliance to draw a line against the darkness and the shadows, which we now know Clark is a part of. So there is no contradiction here in coming to the aid of Sheridan, because Clark is an agent of the Shadows agenda. The Minbari are now involved again, as they were in the last Shadow War. Note that Delenn has also tipped her hand here somewhat, because the White Star will have been scanned by the secondary Earth fleet. Not quite as anonymous as it was, but I guess that counts the cat's out of the bag anyway. So, everyone has severed dreams here. The Grey Council is cut in two, Earthships fight Earthships, colonies split from Earth, Babylon 5 splits from Earth, the non-aligned worlds reach each other's throats, ISN goes dark for telling the truth, peace is dead. Chaos writ large. But Sheridan has held his line and Delenn hers. The right people, in the right place, at the right time, as an inquisitive fellow once noted. Both Delenn and Sheridan have some lovely personal scenes in this episode, in amongst all the fire and fury, which is ever a strength of the series. Delenn faces down a warrior caste heavy council, Sheridan faces down his own comrades in arms. And give thanks to whatever technology deity was looking after the rendering farms for this episode too. So many CGI shots, it's crazy for the time, and I would attribute the rapid retreat at the end in part to how much time they wouldn't have had left to render a more dignified exit. So let's break down the action. In the opening we see the Alexander, an Omega-class destroyer equipped with a new atmosphere-capable Star Furies, the Thunderbolts. It seems it's been pursued by the smaller, older Hyperion-class Clarkstown for some time, and I think Major Ryan was holding back because the Hyperion doesn't have a Star Fury contingent to speak of, while he packs a decent number. He also, as we finally see here, has some fairly significant rear-facing firepower, which is deeply handy in a pursuit scenario. It seems a bit of a bum deal for the fighter pilots who seem to play a role in taking fire of the capital ship, but I suppose it's part of what they're there for. There are no shields here. Once you're hit, you stay physically hit, so the Alexander can't really afford to take too much punishment in order to be able to stay mobile. So the Clarkstown has to be put down in order for the Alexander to stay in the fight, simple as that. Now, you'll note that Haig is killed off screen here. Apparently, he was offered a part on a Deep Space Nine episode that clashed, and took that, so James killed the character. Pretty clear message there, really. That's okay, I rather like the Ryan character anyway, and he fits in pretty rapidly, considering we've not met him before. Pretty sure he was in the final episode of Quantum Leap. I liked when Delenn's Flatiron left the station, the Alexander was in view parked next to the station. It's a good continuity catch, and also liked the fact that the Churchill formed its own jump point to come in when she was using the gate. Ironic actually, because the assaulting Earth forces could have opted to form their own jump points to come in too, but they all came in through the gate. Slightly surprised that they couldn't just be denied access to use it, but maybe that's not a thing. It also means they're in a sort of choke point when they come into the local space, but again, because Sheridan didn't want to start the fight, I guess he didn't want to try and jump them as they came through the gate. Now, you've got to remember here that this is just a single episode of the show, and it can only do so much. So you could argue that there should have been more than one breaching pod, etc. I get that. But I think the attacking force would have been strung together pretty quickly, and actually their job is incredibly difficult when you consider that they are having a full-on firefight in proximity to a station with 250,000 souls on it. As we've seen before, the station does not react well to hits from capital ship-grade weapons, and here we have 4 on the opposing side, engaging the station and 2 mobile opponents. Yet in a sense, all the ships have to check their fire, because neither side really wants to see the station go up in flames. For one, it's their home, the other, it's their prize. So everyone, apart from the station, that can only shoot away from itself, has one hand tied behind their back. It's a long way from a foregone conclusion, and were it not for the confusion between the Agrippa and the Roanoke, it's very believable that the defending forces could indeed hold out, and even though we've only met her briefly, I did give a damn about Hiroshi going down and taking the enemy with her. She was committed. It was also smart to put Ivanova in the middle of it as someone we could be even more concerned for, because she's only in a fury, and her stubbornness could have killed her but for Sheridan having a direct line to her telling her to get out. And even Sheridan doesn't escape unscathed. Everyone on the station has totally put it on the line in the course of this episode. Careers, lives, everything. There's no arguing with that. Yes, I'm ignoring Franklin, but medics aren't known for their combat skills. The resolution is terrific because I really didn't call it. I thought it was going to be a pincer-style attack on the station from 2 angles, but of course Minbari are accurate enough to form jump points that close in without hitting the station. As Drall had already been mentioned, he was clearly a potential saviour in plot device terms, but to have 3 Minbari war cruisers come onto the scene and the White Star, and to then have Delenn give that speech, basically telling the Earth Fleet to do one, was superb. Also nice that Sheridan acknowledged that bringing that to bear would have had a personal cost for Delenn, but I think in a sense she paid that cost a while ago. Interesting to see that one warrior caste tried to stop one of the 5 leaving but was rejected. Having just 4 left on the council really means it must be unable to function, because there's no majority as such. So clearly there will be consequences to flow from that. I was just thinking that there was of course mention in this episode about the Shadows as allies, so you might ask, why didn't they jump in on Clark's side here? Well, given the sheer number of ships Clark did throw at the station, it ought to have been a foregone conclusion, all things being equal. Pretty stupid not to go all in the first place, really, although we don't really know how long the battle went on for in real time. Also, we don't know where Kosh was, so the Shadows might not have been willing to risk harm to Avorlon and whatever consequences that might bring. So fair enough really, clean fight all around this way. Also possible, Clark was asking the Shadows to keep an eye on alien races while this infighting was going on, of course. You'll find clips from this episode elsewhere on YouTube, and I've discovered that IMDb TV channel shows Babylon 5 for nothing, with ads, if you want to check out the action in a more lively fashion than I do here. It really is one of the best episodes, and perhaps almost more for what it sets up than even what it achieves on its own merits, because that's the way the show is planned out. So obviously there's going to be a lot of dust settling in the next few episodes, and Babylon 5 is now independent of Earth, which will bring its own challenges. I shall now draw a breath and think about the next episode. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.